What happens when a black woman, who's quietly serving her country, becomes the target of racist cops? They think they can disrespect her with impunity, but little do they know, their actions will ignite a series of events that will shock the world. Prepare for an intense revelation and a powerful turnaround. What happens next will make you question the systems that protect those who abuse power. It's a busy day in the city. The sun is high and the streets are filled with people moving quickly between destinations. At the corner of 5th and Main, a woman walks past a group of police officers standing near their patrol car. She moves with purpose, dressed in a tailored outfit that speaks to both professionalism and authority. She's focused, unaware that she's being watched by 2 officers, standing together in a group, one of them clearly more intrigued by her than the others. The officers glance at each other, and a quiet conversation passes between them. Their gaze lingers on her, a woman who is composed, walking with confidence, holding her head high. But to these cops, her presence on the street, her self-assuredness, somehow becomes an invitation for mockery. The officer, who's already stepped out of line, leans in closer to his partner, a smug smile tugging at his lips. Think she's some kind of high and mighty lawyer or something? He mutters under his breath. His partner shrugs, no concern for who she really is. As the woman approaches, the officer steps forward, blocking her path. His movement is subtle, but calculated. He comments on her appearance, leering. The words come out with a sneer accompanied by a low, mocking chuckle. Pretty little thing walking around here like you own the place. The woman ignores him, walking briskly to avoid confrontation, but the officer's irritation grows. In a move fueled by his own prejudices, he stretches out his hand and reaches toward her skirt. Before he can make contact, the woman stops. She stands firm, like she's been frozen in time, her posture unwavering. The officer's hand is still hanging in the air as she turns, meeting his gaze. The room around them seems to hold its breath, and in that moment, a quiet calmness radiates from her. The officer pulls his hand back, taken aback by the sudden stillness, unsure of how to proceed. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice is steady, strong, and unmoved by the derision she's just faced. She meets his gaze without flinching, her eyes intense and unwavering. The officer hesitates for a moment, caught off guard by her reaction. His partner, who's been observing the entire interaction, looks around nervously, unsure of whether to intervene. But the first officer, still filled with arrogance, steps closer. "I was just checking out your outfit, lady. Didn't mean no harm," he mutters, clearly trying to save face. The woman doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she takes a step back, maintaining her calm. The tension is palpable. Her eyes flicker over to his partner, who now seems uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. They're both realizing that what was meant to be a casual act of harassment is now beginning to feel like a dangerous mistake. Without warning, the woman reaches into her bag, pulling out a badge and flashing it in front of the officers' faces. The officer's eyes widen, and his jaw clenches. He's no longer looking at just a black woman. He's staring at someone who he's underestimated. Her badge isn't just for any department. It's the emblem of someone who served with distinction, a CIA agent. Her role in national security goes unnoticed by these officers, who thought they could exploit a vulnerable target. The officer's demeanor shifts immediately, and his bravado deflates. His voice, once dripping with arrogance, now falters. "Wait a minute," he stammers, suddenly unsure of how to handle the situation. The woman steps forward, her calmness like an unbreakable force. "I suggest you remember your place," she says, her voice stern yet controlled. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The scene around them is tense now. Some bystanders are staring in disbelief, unsure of what's happening. The woman remains calm, her composure a stark contrast to the uncertainty of the officers before her. They know they've crossed a line, one they shouldn't have dared to. As the woman turns to walk away, she calls out, "If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll make sure you regret it." The two officers stand frozen, their previous confidence now shattered. The woman's calm but resolute presence leaves them speechless, and they know better than to challenge her further. They let her go, realizing they've made a monumental error. By the time the officers report the incident, they're only left to explain their actions to superiors. But the damage has been done. The officers' reputations are in question. They will face an inquiry about their conduct, and the woman's warning carries far more weight than they anticipated. For the first time in their careers, they face a reckoning, something they've never had to endure before. And for the woman, it's just another day. But it's also a reminder of the power of standing tall in the face of injustice. Maya is not your typical woman. Her name carries weight in the circles of those who understand the true nature of counterintelligence. As a black woman working in one of the most elite departments of the country, the CIA, she has earned her place through brilliance, hard work, and an unrelenting drive to break barriers. But for all her accomplishments, she's had to face a reality that many of her peers may never fully comprehend. Being a black woman in a field dominated by white men means that Maya is forced to prove herself constantly. From her early years in a neighborhood where systemic racism and inequality were part of the fabric of life, Maya has always known what it meant to be underestimated. But she never let that define her. Instead, she channeled her experiences into a desire to change the system from within. Maya's journey wasn't easy, but she never wavered. Whether working in the most covert operations or facing racial bias from her colleagues, she stayed focused on her mission and her ultimate goal: making the world a better, safer place. Over the years, Maya's reputation grew. Her intelligence, quick thinking, and unflinching determination made her an invaluable asset. While others saw her race and gender as a reason to doubt her capabilities, Maya proved them wrong every step of the way. Her work was impeccable, and her reputation for getting results solidified her standing in the CIA. She was no longer seen as the black woman in the room. She was simply Maya, one of the best agents the agency had. But as powerful as Maya had become, the bias she faced in her everyday life never fully left her. It was a constant undercurrent in every interaction, every situation. It was a reality she could not escape, no matter how high she climbed. Then there were the cops. Officer Mitchell and his partner, Officer Harris, both had a long history of racist behavior. Their tenure in the police force had granted them a sense of entitlement and power that clouded their judgment. They believed they could treat people however they wanted, especially when it came to people of color. Discriminatory stops, racial profiling, and biased assumptions were not new to them. They were simply part of their daily routines. They had been empowered by the system to act without consequences, and in their eyes, people like Maya were easy targets. Mitchell, in particular, was the type of officer who reveled in his power. His bias ran deep, often influencing his decisions without him even realizing how harmful it was. He had been conditioned to see people of color as less than or as threats. And when he spotted Maya, confident, strong, and walking with an air of purpose, he made an immediate assumption. In his eyes, she was just another black woman walking through the city streets, and in his mind, she had no right to exist in the spaces she occupied. His bias was so deeply embedded that he felt justified in his actions before even knowing who she truly was. Maya was oblivious to their presence as she walked past the officers, heading to an errand that was part of her regular day. She was focused on the tasks ahead, knowing she had a lot of work waiting for her. But Officer Mitchell's gaze followed her, eyes narrowing with judgment. He muttered something under his breath to Harris, who just nodded in silent agreement. Without warning, Mitchell turned and made a beeline toward Maya, his arrogance radiating as he stepped in front of her. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he barked, his tone condescending. Maya, unflinching, lifted her eyes to meet his. "I'm walking," she said flatly, unfazed by his interruption. "Not with that attitude you aren't," Mitchell sneered. "You think you can just walk around here, looking like you own the place?" Maya's blood began to simmer, but she stood her ground. She knew the consequences of engaging with him, what his type of officer was capable of when provoked. But her patience was wearing thin. She knew she didn't need to explain herself to him. "I'm just doing my job," she responded coolly, ready to walk past him. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Mitchell retorted, stepping closer. "You're not supposed to be here. This is no place for you." He was too close now, his words filled with venom. His assumption that he could intimidate Maya was palpable. Before she could respond, he reached forward and grabbed her arm. Maya reacted instantly, using her training to free herself from his grip. She wasn't afraid, but she knew this wasn't just an argument. This could escalate quickly. "Get your hands off me," she warned, her voice low but authoritative. "I suggest you walk away." Harris, sensing the tension, started to move closer. He didn't seem interested in diffusing the situation. He wanted to back up his partner. But before anything could go further, Maya did what she had been trained to do in high-pressure moments. She calmly walked away from them, leaving the officers standing there, their prejudices unaddressed, their power temporarily stifled. What Mitchell didn't know was that Maya wasn't just any woman. Her composure and calm were not just a response to their harassment. They were a reflection of a life lived with a purpose. And soon, the officers would learn just how much of a mistake it was to underestimate her. Maya walked down the busy street, trying to maintain her focus, thinking about the day ahead. She had a mission to complete, and in the chaos of the city, she blended in seamlessly. But as she passed by the group of police officers, she sensed an unsettling shift. She didn't expect to be bothered, but Officer Mitchell, fueled by his own prejudices, decided she would be the latest target. The officer's gaze followed her, eyes narrowing with condescension. Maya could feel his judgment before he even spoke. He stood there, arms crossed, a sneer forming on his face. And then, without warning, his hand reached out and touched her skirt. An inappropriate move intended to assert control, to remind her of her supposed place. Maya's breath hitched for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. She didn't flinch or react impulsively. Instead, she turned to face him, her posture unyielding. The crowd around them seemed to sense the tension rising in the air. Officer Mitchell let out a low chuckle, thinking his act of power was a simple, unchallenged victory. He smirked, exchanging a few words with his partner, Harris, who laughed along, ignorant of the bigger picture. They assumed that Maya, a black woman walking alone, would let it slide. After all, This wasn't the first time an officer like Mitchell had abused their position for their own amusement. But Maya wasn't about to let this moment pass quietly. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Maya's voice cut through the air, calm and commanding, her eyes locking with Mitchell's. Mitchell paused, the cocky grin slipping off his face for a brief second. The crowd around them went silent, sensing that something more was about to unfold. Harris exchanged an uneasy glance with his partner, still unsure of the gravity of the situation. Maya stood tall, her composure unshaken, knowing that she now held the power to turn the tables. "I am a CIA agent," she said, her voice steady, "and I have just enough evidence to expose your misconduct." The words hung in the air, resonating with both the officers and the bystanders. Mitchell's face drained of color, his smirk replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. His thoughts raced. He had misjudged her, underestimated her entirely. The crowd, once uncomfortable with the tension, now began to stir. Phones were out, capturing the moment. Bystanders whispered among themselves, their disbelief turning into murmurs of support for Maya. Mitchell looked around frantically, his bravado crumbling as the realization set in. He had just touched the wrong person, and now he was being exposed for his actions. His arrogance, once impenetrable, had cracked. The weight of what he had done and who Maya truly was began to sink in. The crowd, sensing the shift in power, leaned in, some recording the exchange, while others simply watched in stunned silence. Mitchell, now realizing he had targeted the wrong person, could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up his neck. His partner, Harris, stood there, equally dumbfounded by what he had just witnessed. Maya's eyes remained steady as she watched the officers. No anger, no fear, just the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how to wield their power in a world that often tried to strip them of it. The situation quickly escalated as the crowd grew, and with each passing second, it became clear that Mitchell's attempt to belittle and dehumanize Maya had backfired. He hadn't just touched the wrong skirt, he had touched the wrong woman, one who held authority and one who would not let his actions slide without consequence. What would you have done if you were Maya in this situation? How would you react when faced with an abuse of power? Share your thoughts below and let us know where you're watching from. As the video of the confrontation spreads across social media, it quickly gains traction. The world watches as Maya stands unflinchingly in the face of Officer Mitchell's arrogance, exposing his blatant disrespect. The footage, captured by bystanders on their phones, reveals the full extent of the officer's misconduct, his inappropriate behavior, the mocking laughter, and his assumption that Maya, a black woman, would be an easy target for his bullying. Within hours, the video goes viral, sparking outrage across the country. News stations pick up the story, and pundits begin to dissect the incident. The public reaction is swift and intense. People are disgusted by the officer's actions, but equally disturbed by the realization that this is far from an isolated incident. Maya's calm and confident response to the officers has shown that the line between right and wrong doesn't shift when you hold power. It becomes a clear truth. The authorities, faced with mounting pressure, are forced to take immediate action. Maya's revelation that she is a CIA agent is a key turning point in the unfolding story. While it initially caught the officers off guard, her statement is no longer just about a confrontation on a city street. It's a catalyst that ignites the wider issue of police misconduct. The statement forces the authorities to reconsider their position, What happened to Maya was not just one cop's lapse in judgment, but a reflection of a deeper systemic problem. As the public's demands for accountability grow louder, an internal investigation is launched. Officer Mitchell is placed on administrative leave pending the outcome, and his partner, Harris, is also reassigned while the investigation continues. Maya's bravery in the face of injustice has forced the hands of those in power to confront what they had allowed to fester for so long. It doesn't take long for the investigation to uncover the truth. Officer Mitchell, it turns out, has a long history of mistreating citizens, particularly women of color. Colleagues and civilians alike come forward with stories of his behavior, stories that had been swept under the rug for far too long. His actions have been excused or ignored, and it takes Maya's courageous stand to bring the rot to the surface. The investigation doesn't stop with Mitchell. Maya's actions spark a wider discussion about police accountability. The public outrage grows, with protests demanding justice for victims of police brutality and systemic racism. The hashtag #NumberJusticeForMaya trends on social media as people from all walks of life express their support for her, not only for her bravery but for her role in exposing the larger issue of racial bias within law enforcement. As the media continues to report on the story, experts weigh in on police practices, racial profiling, and the abuse of power. Scholars, activists, and everyday citizens join the conversation, pushing for reforms that have long been necessary. Maya's actions, so simple yet so profound, become a rallying cry for those seeking justice in an increasingly divided society. For the police department, the pressure mounts. Calls for reform begin, and it's clear that this incident will not just fade away. The powers that be are forced to address the systemic issues that allowed Officer Mitchell to operate unchecked for so long. The public demands better training, oversight, and accountability for officers who exhibit racist behavior. Maya, in the face of this storm, remains calm. She has not only exposed an officer's misconduct, but has forced the public to confront uncomfortable truths. As the story unfolds, she becomes a symbol of resilience and accountability. Her quiet strength and dedication to justice have inspired countless others, showing that one person, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, can spark real change. Maya's actions didn't just bring one officer to justice. They set off a chain reaction that will forever alter the way police misconduct is viewed and addressed. The scandal brings the nation's attention back to the urgent need for reform and accountability. The road ahead will not be easy, but Maya's bravery and the collective outcry of the public make one thing clear: things are beginning to change. Officer Mitchell's actions, fueled by racial bias, have finally caught up with him. The investigation exposes his long-standing pattern of discriminatory behavior, and the public outcry is deafening. Maya's courage in standing up to him has set the wheels of justice in motion, and the consequences for Officer Mitchell are swift and severe. The department moves quickly to terminate Officer Mitchell. His name is dragged through the mud as the public learns of his track record of racial profiling and abuse of power. The once respected officer is now a symbol of everything that's wrong with law enforcement's treatment of marginalized communities. His career, built on years of service, is obliterated in an instant, and he faces not only the loss of his job, but also criminal charges for his misconduct, as Maya insists that his record be reviewed by internal affairs. Officer Harris, his partner in this act of discrimination, also faces consequences. While he did not actively engage in the incident, his failure to intervene and stop the harassment makes him complicit. He, too, is placed under investigation, and his own position within the force is called into question. This dual accountability sends a powerful message. When one officer goes unchecked, others are equally responsible for the environment they allow to fester. Maya, empowered by the results of her courageous actions, becomes a beacon of change in the face of the racist system she has long fought against. The police department is forced to rethink its culture and practices. New programs on racial bias, consent, and the power dynamics within law enforcement are put in place to educate officers on how their actions affect the communities they serve. This is not just an attempt to address the specific incident with Officer Mitchell, but to tackle the broader issue of systemic racism that permeates many parts of law enforcement. As part of her continued efforts for justice, Maya uses her position and resources within the CIA to ensure that Officer Mitchell's misconduct is addressed through every channel possible. She works with internal affairs to ensure a thorough investigation into his actions, as well as his interactions with civilians in the past. Maya pushes for criminal charges, holding Mitchell accountable for his abuse of power and ensuring he faces the consequences for his behavior in full. Her role in this transformation doesn't end with the removal of Officer Mitchell. Maya becomes a vocal advocate for police reform, using her platform to bring attention to the ongoing issues of racial bias and systemic inequality within law enforcement. Her position as a CIA agent gives her unique credibility and influence, allowing her to advocate for change at the highest levels. She lobbies for better policies, calling for national reforms that address issues of discrimination, police brutality, and accountability. Maya's rise as a leader in this cause inspires others who have faced similar discrimination to speak out. Her bravery in exposing the truth and standing up to injustice serves as a rallying cry for communities affected by racial inequality. Her actions create a ripple effect, sparking movements in other parts of the country and calling attention to the need for systemic change. Her courage, however, isn't just about what she's done in the past. It's about the path she continues to forge forward. Working for the CIA, Maya is determined to make change from within, knowing that real transformation requires the work of both those within the system and those pushing from the outside. Her dedication to breaking down barriers doesn't stop at the police department. It extends to the work she does every day in her role, ensuring that institutions like the CIA also evolve to meet the demands of a changing world. As Maya continues her work, she remains vigilant, knowing that true change isn't just about exposing wrongs. It's about correcting them and preventing them from happening again. Her journey is a testament to the power of resilience and the impact of one person's commitment to justice, equality, and the eradication of racism. The lessons learned from this incident are far-reaching, and Maya will continue to be a guiding force for change for years to come. Through her actions, Maya teaches us all that courage doesn't just come from facing danger. It comes from the willingness to stand up against injustice, no matter the consequences. As the dust settles from the incident, Maya's courage and resolve have sparked a broader movement that ripples through both the CIA and the police department. The change is slow but real. With her influence, significant reforms are being put into place to address the systemic issues of racial bias, abuse of power, and accountability. These reforms are not just about correcting the wrongs of the past, but about ensuring that the future is one where such behavior is not tolerated, in the institutions that are supposed to serve and protect the public. The CIA and police departments begin to adopt new training programs, incorporating racial sensitivity, the importance of consent, and understanding the power dynamics between officers and civilians. These programs are a direct result of Maya's actions, showing that one person's courage can set in motion a chain of events that brings about real, lasting change. She's no longer just an agent of the CIA, she's a symbol of justice and the change that is desperately needed. The community's faith in these institutions begins to rebuild. Maya's actions show them that not all leaders in power are complicit in maintaining the status quo. She has proven that there are individuals who are committed to real change, and the public starts to see the difference. Trust is slowly restored as Maya leads by example, pushing for justice, accountability, and a system that works for everyone, not just a select few. Maya walks through the halls of the CIA with a new sense of purpose. She is no longer just another employee of the organization. She is now a leader, not just in her career but in the fight for justice and equality. The halls that once felt like a distant, impersonal institution now feel like a place where her actions are making a difference, where her voice is being heard, and where change is happening because of the stand she took. With every step, she knows the road ahead will be difficult, but she also knows that her efforts are making the world a better place, even if it's one small victory at a time. Maya's transformation into a leader is not just about the power she has within her role. It's about the power of her actions to shift the very systems she works within. She has proven that confronting injustice head-on is not only possible, but necessary. She's carved out a path where others can follow, where a voice that was once silenced by oppression and bias now leads with strength, integrity, and the unwavering commitment to bring about change. As she walks through the corridors, Maya knows the work is far from over. There are still injustices to fight, and her journey is just beginning. She walks with purpose, her eyes focused on the horizon. The changes she's instigated have already begun, but her work doesn't end with that. Her final thought as she moves through the building is simple, but it drives her forward. I will continue to fight for justice, for equality, and for a world where abuse of power will no longer be tolerated. Maya knows the fight is ongoing, and it's one she'll never back down from. True strength comes from confronting injustice head-on and demanding accountability, no matter who stands in your way.